All right, here we go. Mark Vientos, fresh as ever. The New York Yankees taking care of business, and a bad bunny could be even worse. Plenty more to go on the second episode of the Black Diamond Podcast. Nice transition. All right, welcome everyone to the second official episode of the Black Diamond Podcast. I am one half of your fearless co-host, Maddie Trainer, and over to my right side on the screen, but left in real life, is my fabulous co-host, Chris Hecker. Chris, how the heck are you doing today?
I am great, man. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Very eventful. I would say past 4 days in the New York area between the Knicks, Rangers, and the drafts for both sports teams. Um, definitely a slow one when it came to baseball, but became very eventful when the weekend showed up. So doing well over here.
Yeah, I mean it actually got off to a pretty eventful start if you think about it cuz back on Monday, less than 24 hours after we recorded episode 1, uh the Yankees played an afternoon game against the A's, and Aaron Boone got ejected in the first inning because of a fan that was heckling him.
Yeah, what happened with that? I mean, I saw a lot of memes on Twitter, and obviously with the fiasco of what's known as the MLB officiating and umpires. What
Yeah,
happened?
they got to do something about that. But basically, what happened was, so game starts, and the umpire was making some questionable calls. You
Per
know,
usual.
questionable strike zone, some balls that should have been strikes, or vice versa. And Aaron Boone shouts something from the dugout, like basically telling the umpire to get it together. And the umpire was like, all right, like, I heard you, and if you got anything else to say, I'm throwing you out. And like, this was all like on the mic too, so it's not like you had to like leave it up for interpretation, like if you were watching the broadcast in real time, like this was all mic'd up. So the umpire goes, if you say anything else, if you say anything else, you're done. And then a fan yells something, like from like the first or second row behind the Yankees dugout. A fan yells something, and he like he was wearing sunglasses, and I guess he kind of sounded like Boone a little bit, maybe. But he yells something, and then the umpire was just like, "That's it, you're done." And then like Aaron Boone lost his shit and was like, "I didn't even say anything." He was like, and then everyone's pointing to the fan, being like, "No, no, it was him." And then Boone was like, "I didn't say anything. It was someone. It was someone in the crowd." And the umpire basically just said, "I don't care." He basically said, "I don't care who said what. You're done." And then I think in like a interview after the game, the umpire even said, he was like, "Yeah, like I knew it wasn't him, but like I told him that I didn't want to hear anything, and someone else said something, so from that general area, so Boone had to go," was pretty much what he said. So he was basically admitting that he like wrongfully ejected him, but he was just like standing on it because that's what umpires tend to do. But yeah, that was the eventful start of a fairly uneventful week, in New York baseball. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting way to get the week started.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not just umpires. I think everyone kind of in life, if you know that you did something wrong and someone calls you out on it, you get very defensive. So I think the fact that even though deep down he knew it wasn't Boone, at the same time he was already pissed off because he knew that he was getting called out for officiating a game terribly already. So
Yeah,
he was just adding more fuel to the fire, and you know it's it's awful that they make horrific calls that change the game. But then when you're changing the coaching and the strategy procedure just because you don't like if someone's calling you a name is just really disgusting. I mean, it's been going on for years, and it seems like I guess that the MLB. umpiring union must be one of the top in the nation, not just in sports, but in all, because none of these guys get fired or suspended or penalized for like any of this.
Yeah, it's really insane to think about how like I mean, obviously Angel Hernandez is like, the obvious one that everyone points to. And, for every blunder that he has and like, the season's been, it's barely been a month. We're barely a month into the season and there's already been like I feel like at least like five like Angel Hernandez incidents and like there's like nothing like he doesn't get, I mean, aside from that one year where they like didn't let him umpire any playoff games and he tried to like sue the union. um Aside from that, like he hasn't gotten like there hasn't been any sort of accountability for him and like the horrendous job that he does like on an almost daily basis as an umpire. And I have this like kind of tinfoil hat theory that they're doing it on purpose because they want us to accept the robo umps. But yeah, it's something's got to be done about it because it's just absurd like what they what they get away with. And I understand like I don't really want robot umpires like I understand like baseball there should always be a human element. And I think that like I don't agree with robo strike zones either. I think there's a little bit of subjectivity to a strike zone or like that, a good framing job should be rewarded. So like, if it's a ball, but like the catcher framed it really well and they call it a strike, I don't have any issue with that. Or like vice versa. If it's like in the strike zone, but it's a terrible framing job, and they don't get rewarded for it and it's called the ball, I don't have any issue with that either. So I think should be like some humanity to it. But when you have umpires just missing very blatantly obvious calls, something has to change. What the exact answer is or what the solution is, I do not know. I am not getting paid to make those decisions. But yeah, I mean, and that was really one of the first times that you actually like, aside from the umpire who like fucked up Amandas Galarraga's perfect game, who I think was it Jim Joyce who did that, and I think he was actually, aside from that, I think he was actually a fairly decent umpire. He just like had made the worst possible call at the worst possible time.
Poor
Uh,
guy.
and I like kind of feel bad for him, and they should just do the right thing and just like just make it a perfect game in the history books or whatever. I mean, it's a perfect game in my book. But I mean, aside from that, like you never even really hear like any umpires or any officials in like any sports really have to like talk or like answer questions like after the games. And I think it's about time we started doing that.
Yeah, it's definitely about accountability, and I think the like one of the biggest sayings is that we shouldn't know the any of the referees' names, and the fact that people's always sending out tweets or memes about like, oh, look who's officiating tonight, like that's just like a
Yeah.
nasty taste for these sports when people that you actively employ are you know getting mocked and made fun of and actively are not good at their job and still getting employed and paid for it. Interesting though. So this was not something we talked about in the pre-show, but it reminded me of what I was listening to instead of robo umps, what they do in the minor leagues apparently is that you're able to
You're able to
challenge.
challenge it, yeah.
Yeah, you're able to challenge it, and I think a lot of people are worried about that would take too long. And in my opinion, I thought like an active and maybe a good happy medium would be that you get one per batter, one per inning, depending on. And if you win that challenge, you get to keep it for that inning. And then, but so that a lot of people are thinking like, oh, they're just going to challenge every single time. But it's like, no, if you have the threat of losing it, say like early on, then you're going to be more weary to use it maybe in a tougher situation or maybe with two outs or maybe on a 3-2. Like you have to be very calculated in how you use it, and so maybe having one that you can keep going as you're correct, or you lose it right away if you're incorrect, just for that inning. So you get one every inning, and then you can go with it as much as you can.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate it, and I mean, the first time I saw them do the first time I saw them do the challenge thing, I think it was in like a spring training game. They were like experimenting with it, and like when I first saw it, I was like, I don't really like this, to be honest. But I think that it is, I think that it is a way to, to mitigate some of the like just piss poor umpiring that we have seen, over the last few years, a few decades, however long it's been. But I don't hate the whole like being able to challenge it. I think like maybe one way to, you know, like one way to maybe save it from, one way to like kind of mitigate it, like taking too much time out of the game. Like I would say either you only save it for like if it's like a ball four or a strike three call rather than like earlier in the count. Or if you're going to keep it earlier in the count, then maybe like have some sort of, aside from I don't hate the I kind of like the idea of losing the challenge if it's not successful, or keeping the challenge if it is. But what if like there was some sort of penalty for getting it wrong, like if you get like you get an extra strike or an extra ball if you get it wrong, kind of like how how like in hockey, like if you challenge like for offsides or goalie interference or whatever, and you don't get it right, then the team that just scored a goal gets a power play after, like kind of similar to like that concept. That could maybe make things interesting and would probably make teams hesitate, but that might be a little bit extreme. I mean, maybe just maybe just like the fear of losing that challenge would be enough to kind of make teams or managers think twice before before throwing the challenge flag.
Yeah, and I think the biggest things is we don't want to get rid of pitch framing, because obviously that's a lot that goes into being a catcher and being an elite pitch framer. Like those strikes that are borderline, those are the ones like you're not really going to challenge. I think it would be the ones where, for example, that Juan Soto at bat where he saw 7 pitches and every single
Yeah.
one of them were out of the strike zone and he struck out. So it would be that for an example, that's the ones where you would be using the challenge on. Where if you're a pitcher, you're not gonna say you hit a borderline strike and they call it a ball in the first pitch of the game. Like you're not gonna waste it there. You're gonna do it more on the line where I think they'll use it more like during 2 strike accounts,
Yeah.
or when they're down in the count, on ball 3 going into ball 4.
Yeah, and I think for like I would say for like the last 2 innings of the game, like not to get too not to get like too NFL about it, but maybe make it like, I don't know, this might be like overkill, but maybe make it more like kind of like where the reviews come from like upstairs or something. But that might be too ticky tacky.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the playoffs, I think that would be valid, because I mean, when you get to I think when you're doing the 162, it's kind of like why they have the ghost runner. You have the ghost runner during the 162, so you're not throwing like blowing out arms. You're able to not have people watch games for 5 6 hours. But once you're in the playoffs, they get rid of the runners and everything's off limits, because every single game at that point
Yeah,
matters.
it's so crucial.
Yeah, exactly. So I think if they come something along the lines of that, that would be. I think there's a fine line where, of course, it's going to go in the minors first and see how it works. But I mean, between the not throwing over the pitch clock and the bigger bases, it seems like they're at least trying to innovate ways to get the game better. But of course, the biggest part of that is the officiating, and I think until that's settled, we're gonna have fans on both sides, complaining.
Yeah, and I mean, you can't argue that. You really can't argue that, like, what they've implemented as far as the pitch clock and everything, that it hasn't sped up the game. And I like that they've made and I like the change to the bases, making them bigger. I mean, it makes steals and base running a bigger part of the game too. And I feel like for a while, like, we were kind of playing three true outcome type of baseball. So it's kind of, so it's kind of cool to have, like, a little bit of a little bit of pushback and see like that base running, and like going first to third and stealing bases and stuff like that, like, is like a bigger part of the game and like matters more again. But yeah, I mean, and like, obviously, I think that the games being quicker is very good for the game. It's good for ratings. It's good for attendance. People feel a lot more willing to bring their kids and bring their family out to like a ball game on a weeknight if they if they think going into it, okay, like, this could be like a 2.5 hour game versus like a 3.5 or 4.5 hour game, like, if it's like an average game. But you have to uphold the integrity, and you got to get the calls right. I mean, there's just too much money on the line, too much at stake for, and like, I understand if it's like a borderline call, and if it's like a little bit subjective. But to be for games to be decided by calls that are just blatantly wrong, this day and age, with all the technology we have, is just like unacceptable. So gotta, you gotta clean that up.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things too is that changing the call can also throw off the pitcher and their flow, and that can absolutely alter the game. And I think there a perfect example of that this week was when Judge ended up crushing a home run, which a pitcher was completely thrown off. So it's a good transition to go into the weekly recap. And I have actually some of what we were discussing last week. Starting off with the Yankees, we had their over under around 3.5. We said if they hit four, that would at least be taking care of business. But it wasn't just getting four; it was how they get four, because obviously they had a 4 game set at home against the A's, who were on a long road trip and maybe looking to get out of there. And then the Yankees themselves were turning around and going from one extreme, which is one of the worst teams in baseball, to one of the best in the National League, and going into Milwaukee. And they ended up going 4-3 this week. So, um, you know, break down, the series for us. Any particular standouts from that? Not only things that were positive that you like to see, obviously, besides taking a series split and a series win against an NL contender, but like also some things maybe that you didn't like to see as well, because not everything's going to be perfect in baseball, and you want to see some signs, particularly maybe some from players, position players or pitchers, or maybe some areas on the team that you hope or have been looking better now than they did maybe a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, so we split with Oakland. It was kind of a lot more of a struggle than you may have expected it to be. They lose the first game. They lose the first game where Boone got ejected. They lose that game 2-0, uh, which I think that's like their. I mean, the Yankees have lost like 10 games. And I think almost half of them have been shutouts. So it's like very clear. It's just like, if you score runs, you'll probably win. If you don't, you'll probably lose. Uh, so I mean, yeah. So they lose the first game 2-0. Then they take the next two. They grind a win out 4-3 on Tuesday, and then Wednesday they beat the A's 7-3. And then in that last game, they lose 3-1, I believe. So not quite a shutout, but another game where they just have very low output from where they had very low output from the bats. Then they go up to Milwaukee. They lose the first game 7-6, and that's a game I thought that really they should have had. I thought the way Boone managed, like for as far as something that I don't like, I thought the way Boone managed the bullpen at the end of that game wasn't very good. Like he brought in, like I don't know, he brought in Clay Holmes for like 1 inning in that game, and he didn't even throw that many pitches, and then they just took him out. Uh, like he went like 1, 2, 3. Went 1, 2, 3 through the order. Didn't give up any hits, and then you bring in what's his name, Michael Tonkin, who I think we just claimed off. Yeah, we just claimed him off waivers from the
you,
Mets.
you mean the Michael Tonkin that we so we DFA'd after letting him get crushed. He was on his way to Minnesota. Well, he went to Minnesota, then they let him get crushed. And so we reclaimed him. And so there was a funny story where they shipped his bags to Minnesota, and by the time he was done pitching, the Mets reclaimed him, and his bags didn't even get there yet. So he didn't even get to have the luggage to send back to New York. So I mean, I guess from going to the Mets to the Yankees is easier for him in a living lifestyle. But
Yeah.
yeah, this poor
Wait,
guy.
so so why was he going to Minnesota? Was
So
he
he got
like
claimed by them, and
he
he
got
ended up
claimed by the Twins
he ended up being a long reliever for them uh in one
for
of
like a
his
day?
yeah, I think. Let me I gotta pull that up really quickly because that's funny. I had no idea that
Yeah.
the Yankees got him.
Funny
The
enough, he was actually drafted by the Twins too.
so
Uh,
he when we when we DFA'd him, it was on April 4th, and he gave up 3 runs to Detroit. And this was in the extra innings. So this was basically blew the
yeah.
game away for us, and we lost it. When Minnesota claimed him, they played Detroit again, and he gave up 2 more runs in 2 innings. And so he got DFA'd after that.
Wow. Yeah, it's crazy. Like I guess I don't even know if they like shaved his beard yet, because like I'm looking at his like player profile picture now, and like it's like him in a Yankee uniform, but like he still has the beard, and it's like so weird. It's so weird to see. So it's like now I'm like, okay, maybe we had that rule for a reason, because this is weird. But yeah, he was also drafted by the Twins in 2008. But so I guess he got to stop home for like 1 day, and then he was back on the move, and probably had to I guess he probably had to make a lot of phone calls to a lot of different like airline people to track down his luggage. So I mean, I guess I'll give him a bit of a pass for for kind of blowing that game. But I don't think he should have been put in that game in the first place. I think that I think they could have gotten a little bit more out of Clay Holmes. If you're trusting him to if you're trusting him to be your closer and your shutdown guy, then you should you should do that. And if you are going to take him out, there should probably be a better option to put in that spot than and I mean they used a few relievers before that too, but there probably should have been I think there would have been a better option to put in that spot than the guy who's just DFA'd by 2 teams and doesn't know where his bags are.
Yeah,
So
I mean, like I think in those situations, and the Mets did a pretty good job at it today. Is when you're in those extra innings, you want to bring in a pitcher who's going to make guys swing and miss. Because I mean, I think a lot of the times now they do concede that first run on second the with the ghost runner on second. But that's what you want to limit to is 1 run. So he
yeah,
was a guy when I saw on the Mets, he literally was a pitch to contact guy. Like he topped out at like 93, 94. His breaking stuff was just always covering the plate. So when you bring him in to you know not only one of his first game as a Yankee, but on the road, extra innings with a lineup as deep as Milwaukee. Like you said, I feel like from someone seeing him pitch, that's definitely a questionable call to send the guy in at that spot.
Yeah. Yeah, so I feel like that's a game that, that maybe the Yankees let get away from them a little bit that, that could have been had. I mean, they were up 6-4, they were up by 2 runs at one point in that game. I like they were up and then they, and then they end up blowing it in the 11th inning. But then after that, they won the last two games by a combined score of 30-8. So, can't really complain about that. The birthday boy Anthony Volpe hit a home run today. Judge hit a home run today. Looks like he might finally be waking up a little bit. And and Juan Soto, one thing that I really like is just the fact that, regardless of how piss poor the umpiring is, or what the strike zones are like, Juan Soto just never expands his strike zone, and he swings it. He swings at the pitches he should swing at, and he lays off what he needs to lay off. So, that's one thing that I really like to see, and and so far he's getting rewarded for it, and he remains one of our best players, and one of the biggest reasons why we're in the position that we're in right now.
Yeah, I think definitely having, like you said, no matter what's going on with the officiating or the game flow or what happened the previous day, he's going to be Juan Soto. He's going to be who he is, and he's going to approach every at bat the same as it was the at bat before or the day before. And I think a lot of that has alleviated the pressure on Aaron Judge. So from what it looks like, he went back to back on Friday. Oh no, today he had a home run. He also had one on Saturday. So it looks like maybe he's going to start rolling, which is pretty crazy because I thought, according to the Boo Birds and some people on social media, he should be DFA'd after last week.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's amazing to see what Aaron Judge has done since getting DFA'd by Yankee Twitter.
Yeah,
But
incredible underdog story.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Definitely just the type of story you tell your kids when you're trying to tell them that they can do anything or aspire to be anything they want to be. But yeah, I mean, it was one of those things with Judge. I mean, I know I said it on the last episode that that he's been struggling and he needs to wake up. It's one of those things where it's like he needed to wake up, but it was also foolish to think that he wouldn't wake up.
Yeah, I think it's a very, like we discussed last week, that it was in a very similar situation to Francisco Lindor. You look at both of these guys as your captains. They go out and they do what they can day by day. They're going to have the same emotions, coming with the same smiles, and you know, it's still, we're not even in May yet. It's going to be May next week, and it looks like that both of them are finally getting out, at least from the power side of this skid, and hopefully can
Yeah.
start playing more consistent baseball. Maybe it's the weather, because this weather has been awful, and a lot of players do get affected and being in the cold or the inconsistency of the wind. There's a lot of analytical factors that go into these, bad luck, batting average, and everything like that.
Slumps. Yeah,
Exactly.
definitely. Yeah, and I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I think so. We dropped episode 1 on Wednesday, and very thank you to anyone who's taken the time to tune into that. We definitely appreciate it, and hopefully you'll be back for more. But ever since we dropped that episode, I think both Judge and Lindor have hit 3 home runs each. So maybe they were just waiting for us.
Yeah, I think absolutely. It seemed like that we manifested um, a couple of things into real life. For example, we said that the that the Yankees taking 4 would be a success, and especially if they did it in a dominating fashion, who could have
Yeah,
potentially swept Milwaukee. And then on the other side, we we said that the over under for the Mets this week was going to be 2.5, and that they would lose 2 out of 3 to the Giants. Um, and I personally thought that they would take 2 out of 3 against the Cardinals. But we also said that there would be a killer Met, a former killer Met, coming back to bite them in the ass, and that happened game 1 on Monday when Michael Conforto hit a home run against the Mets as they took a 5-2 no show. Um, they the only notable thing on the offense that is very inconsistent, very in flux, is Pete Alonso hitting a home run. Pete Alonso, someone made a joke in the beginning of the year with the Angels that Mike Trout might be the first player to have 40 home runs and 40 RBIs. So now watching this Mets offense, it looks like Pete Alonso could
Pete
actually
Alonso
be
might
that.
give him a run for his money.
Exactly. And him and Marte were the only ones to get hits that inning. They had four. And but they really didn't have a chance as far as the flow of the game. So that was one of the ups and downs of the pitching staff. So Jose Quintana, giving up 4 runs in the first 3 innings. And with this lineup where it is at this moment, um, during their streak where they're consistently taking series wins, they were coming from behind, but um, that's something you can't consistently do in baseball because a lot of the times the pitchers are gonna they're not going to be very free flowing. They're going to pitch very tight, and then you have a situation on Monday where Quintana was, the long ball was hurting him, coming one from a former Met, and that was the initial mark that relayed throughout the entire series. The pitching staff, I felt personally, was pitching not to make a mistake instead of pitching aggressive. And one of I think the biggest criticism so far, even though the Mets are in top 10 in the ERA, is they walk a lot of batters. And when you walk a lot of batters, they're not going to chase at any of your off speed stuff that you're throwing at them, and they're going to sit back on your fastball because eventually they know that you're going to need to hit your mark in order to get into a groove. And when they sit back like that, um, eventually the long ball is going to happen. And that was the issue on Tuesday with Severino. I thought Severino actually did end up having another quality start, but it was the long ball that they ended up going down 3-0. But again, it's because this offense terrible with runners in scoring position. Um, you know, uh, on Monday, the 4 hits were between Marte and Pete. On Tuesday, from their 9 hits, Marte and Pete had 5. So as you can see, the inconsistency from the lineup. The Harrison Baders, DJ Stewart's, Tyrone Taylor's, the nice stories. These are guys that are not going to be able to lift you up, um, you know, during your slumps all the time. And then, um,
Yeah,
but
you
then on
hope
Wednesday,
JD
yeah.
Martinez is someone that can you hope JD Martinez is someone that can kind of help mitigate that a little bit.
Yeah, and he was able to show that on Friday. Even though they did lose, I think it was a positive sign that not only did he go one for I think he had a couple of hits that game, but he went opposite field to get an RBI to bring a man in, and I think that's a perfect example of him being a professional hitter. Your lineup is struggling to get people, get a runner in. And I think a lot of younger players these days are very pull happy, very home run happy. And, someone with his stature is just simple as, all right, he's giving me a pitch this outside. I'm going to go with it opposite way and be able to drive in a run. And you would love to see it with Alvarez, Marte, Pete, Lindor all together. But unfortunately, with Alvarez out at the moment, it we're gonna need people to pick up the slack again. And I think another key in these series losses is not only the pop and the power bat that you're missing from Alvarez, but it's the defense in general. So I think this year Omar Narvaez has about 3 catchers interferences, and so not only is that potentially wiping out an out or a strikeout, it's putting a man on base. And so now you're not only putting pressure on your pitcher, but you're putting pressure on your defenders to make these plays in a very close game. And there was a couple of times where, you have Lindor, he's not a big name, but Joey Wendell, who was signed here for defense, Zach Short signed here for defense, Marte known for defense, dropping up, routine pop flies. This catcher giving away free base runners was putting a lot of pressure on their defense, and as a result, I think I wrote it down that the Mets are 20, I think 26, 27, so probably bottom bottom 5 in the league in errors per game with 0.76. So not only are they lacking that power between Narvaez and Thomas Nido, but they are you know, losing on the defensive side, especially when you have pitchers that are pitching to contact.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not a recipe for for winning baseball or to win series. Yeah, I mean, yeah, basically it seems like just seems like the offense isn't really doing enough. It seems that the pitching is actually kind of holding up, to an extent that the pitching with the Mets is holding up, pretty much as well as they can, given what they have. But it just seems like, like you said, like outside of Pete Marte and, now Lindor over the past like 5 days, that really nobody else is contributing. And on top of that, if you're not, on top of that now, I know Bader is like really just there for his defense, and they got Wendell for his defense as well. When you have defensive players who are, not playing defense well, and are committing a lot of errors, and giving those extra runners and those extra runs up, and there's there's a reason why they say, like, in Major League Baseball, like, that pretty much anytime you make a mistake, like, you're going to pay for it. And it seems like that is what's happening to the Mets right now.
Yeah, I think the most you can tell the inconsistency with this offense, and actually, bringing it back and to draft weekend because of the Jets. Kind of reminds me that this pitching staff is reminding me of how they have to come in and almost be perfect like the Jets defense and just hope that the offense kind of
Yeah.
gives them anything. And I feel like that's how it is at the moment. And it's very shocking. I mean, we said last week that David Stearns and Brian Cashman, both guys for knowing how to build bullpens, but a lot of these times these games are not getting out of hand for the Mets. And like when they're transitioning from the starting pitcher, the bullpen is having them stay in the game and not giving up consecutive runs. But I think the most telling sign of inconsistency is that when they do win a game or when they do lose, it's only a couple of guys that are getting these hits. So, like you said, we talked about, it was Pete and Marte for the first 2 games. Even the series finale when they won 8-2. Out of all of they had 10 hits and Lindor had 4 of them. So so you can tell that it's not trickling down in the lineup. But it was a great sign. He went 0 for 5. People questioning his leadership and his attitude because he went 0 for 5 the day before, and then the next day goes 4 for 5. Hits 2 home runs, and all of a sudden, that's the guy
Yeah, all
that
of a sudden that's
was
our
signed.
captain.
Yep, exactly. And you would hope that it would lead into the weekend against the lonely Cardinals. Unfortunately, the hitting was the hitting actually did pick up. They had eight hits in the first game. Um, 8 hits in the first game, 7 in the second game. But again, the pitchers were pitching very tight, very wild. Jose Buto, he was actually pitching well before his game on Friday. Um, but his last start against the Dodgers, he was very iffy. So he was walking a lot of batters and then getting out of jams, having a high pitch count. This time against the Cardinals, same thing was happening. So they sat back, waiting for his fastball, which isn't his out pitch, and they were just driving home against him. So they dropped the first 2 in that series, and then came today. So on Saturday, one of the interesting moves that happened was Marte went on bereavement. God bless him and his family, and they brought up Mark Vientos. And we have a new segment coming up, and this kind of hints at to who's hot, who's not, and who's not for the Mets. Mark Vientos ended up getting pinch hitting for Brett Beatty today in extra innings. The Mets 0 for 11 with runners in scoring position. Unfortunately, there was a cutoff throw at I think it was the top of the 11th, and they had a speedy guy in second, the Cardinals, so the Mets were down 2-1. and then there was so DJ Reed, not DJ Reed, DJ Stewart had the opportunity to win the game in the bottom of the 10th. Uh, Man on first and third, one out. And, this is the perfect example of situational hitting. And someone like DJ Reed, who is a full power guy, loves to pull, grounds it to a double play. Mets give up that run. You think, woe is me. And then the unlikely man, the former St. Louis Cardinal, Harrison Bader, man on third, two strikes, single up the middle. Take the game. We're back at even, and then up comes Mark Vientos, who singled a couple of innings before that. Um, just had this feeling that Liberatore was pitching for the Cardinals. High fastball thrower. That's what Mark Vientos loves it. Put it right in his wheelhouse. Hit it right into center field to have a walk off win and a big boost. From a potential going from they went instead of going 2-4, all of a sudden you're looking at a 1-5 week after having a great West Coast road trip and consecutive series wins, and someone like Mark Vientos, who was pretty pissed off when they signed JD Martinez, and not only that, but not making the team over guys like Zach Short, Joey Wendell, DJ Stewart. Him being able to get called up, go 2 for 2 today with the walk off home run, 1 for 2 the game prior. You're hoping that that kind of emotion, that kind of put your head down, grab your lunchbox, and do what you can do in AAA. Hopefully that equates to his success in the majors, and hopefully he can stick this time and finally become that that next power bat that they need from the minors.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, that was a great, the whole Mark Vientos thing hitting the walk-off home run today. Obviously, that's a great story. I mean, with how much with how much he's been bounced back and forth between the majors and the farm system, and hasn't really been able to stick or really have his moment. But with how depleted the Mets kind of are by injuries right now, he is someone that, if he could build on the momentum of that and kind of put him, kind of ingrain himself in the everyday lineup, that's someone who can kind of help the Mets, could help the Mets stay afloat for the next couple of months until they get until Alvarez eventually comes back, and and they get and obviously it'll probably take JD a little bit more time to really get going, but yeah, that was definitely a good story, and it was definitely good to see him come through in that spot. I think I saw someone tweet oh, I hope Vientos hits a walk-off home run here. And then I think 2 minutes later, you were going off in the Discord, and then I checked Twitter, and I saw a video of it, and yeah, it looked like everyone was pretty happy. It looked like the crowd was pretty fired up by it. So hopefully he can continue to find his way into this lineup and give them some much needed help, for the week they have ahead and beyond.
Yeah, and definitely, the biggest part, being over 500 again at 14 and 13, all of that work that they did in the West Coast, all of that fighting back with those series wins, to potentially go under 500 after all that work could definitely be deflating, especially to, this is a scrappy team. So a lot of the times, they're going to get hit with punches and they're going to have to punch back. And I think seeing the fight from them and the emotion, that's always great. And just last thing on Vientos is that with Beatty struggling a lot with his soft contact, and with the lineup in general, especially with Alvarez going down, like you mentioned, and the lack of options, they're not gonna they're going to allow him to hit his way into this lineup. Obviously, there's going to be some shortcomings with his defense because he was essentially a designated hitter. And since he couldn't take over that opportunity, they sent him down to Syracuse to at least get repetition at third base. But the Mets don't want to play Joey Wendell or Zach Short consistently. They would love it to either be Brett Beatty or Mark Vientos. Someone take that third base job because there's no other options. There's no one making a trade right now at the end of April, beginning of May. And if they are they even like really worth the assets that you started saving up? And there's no options in the minors, right now. And Ronnie Mauricio, who is potentially going to be the third baseman beginning of the season, tore his ACL and has a long way to come back. So I think,
Oof.
yeah. So there's not many options. So I think one of the fun parts of this season, regardless of being in the playoff hunt or not, is seeing can any of these young guys potentially be cornerstones for the future. And then I think, speaking of the future, would be a good transition to look at this week's, um, I would say, victims for the New York teams. Hopefully, since we manifested these records last week, and so I'm looking at it right now, and it looks like that the Yankees start a is it 3 or 4 game series against the Baltimore Orioles, and is this the first time they're playing them this year?
Yes, so it's a 4-game series in Baltimore, and then they play 4 games. So they play them tomorrow. They play them at 6:30. Tuesday at 6:30. Then they got another game Wednesday, which I believe is also at 6:30, and then they play an afternoon game at 1 o'clock on Thursday. So they play a 4-game series with Baltimore in Camden Yards, one of the best ballparks in America. If you haven't gone there, definitely go there. And then they have a home, and then they have a 3-game home series with the Detroit Tigers over the weekend from Friday to Sunday. Since we're on such a roll with our manifestations, I'm just going to go ahead and say Yankees are going to sweep this week. They're going to go 7-0. No, not really, but I wish. So looking at it, I guess a little more objectively, I think that the series with Baltimore is going to be an absolute dogfight. I mean, this is really like I feel like this is really like the first this is like really the first like statement series
This is it, yeah, right
for
here.
these teams. Like like sometimes in the NFL when like a good team's playing another really good team, they'll be like, oh, this is a statement game.
Yeah.
So this I'd say is like a statement series for the AL East. The Yankees currently hold a 1-game lead over the Orioles, but where we will be at the end of that, I really don't know. So I mean, game 1 of this series, we have Clark Schmidt against Grayson Rodriguez. Clark Schmidt has actually been very good this year, but so is Grayson Rodriguez. The Orioles really just have like a lot of young hurlers that are all just like really good. So I feel like this is going to be a really tough series for them. But yeah, they have Clark Schmidt versus Grayson Rodriguez game 1. Then game 2, you have Nestor Cortez versus Dean Kramer. That is a game that I feel like could get ugly.
I actually
Uh,
scooped up Kramer in one of my leagues, so this might be a time to drop him this week.
no, I think that game could get ugly for the Yankees. Like I
Wow.
think that that could be a game where the Yankees get blown out. Then they have Luis Gil, who's also been pretty good, but he's going up against Corbin Burns, so that's kind of a mismatch too. And then the Yankees have Rodon on the bump on Thursday. The Orioles starter has not been announced at this time. I would say the realistic goal for this series, I would say if you could find a way to split this series, maybe take 3 out of 4. I mean, obviously a sweep would be amazing, or 3 out of 4 would be amazing. But I think realistically, if as long as you can, as long as you could split this series with the Orioles, that would keep that 1-game lead on the division intact. And I think that you could definitely be in a much worse spot, after the series is over. But if you could at least split that series and then find a way to take 2 out of 3 against Detroit, who, Detroit started out the season pretty good. I think they were like one of the, they were one of the last remaining undefeated teams, and they've come back down to earth a little bit. But I mean, they're still over 500, and they have some pretty good pitching. Obviously they got Tariq Skubal, who's a beast, and then Casey Mize, he's also really good.
They got that guy Olson too. I have him in a couple of leagues.
Yeah, that might be someone I have to look into, because pretty much all of my teams are just like dumpster fire right now, and
So
I need all the help I can get.
So I have him in this league. He has in 28 innings, he has 26 Ks and a 3.18 ERA.
Damn.
So so that's like So I think
I'm not sure who's pitching for the Tigers by the time we get to the weekend, but it looks like Skubal just pitched today, so that would mean that he would be in line to pitch, because it looks like the Tigers don't have any days off. So he would be in line to pitch that Friday game, and then I guess he would go up against man. Who did the Yankees even start today?
That would be Stroman.
Oh, okay, yeah. So he would be. Yeah, I knew that. So he would be in line to go up against Stroman. So that could be, that would be a pretty good matchup. I'd probably give a slight edge to the Tigers there, just because Skubal is a better pitcher than Stroman. But and then from there, like you're a better team. You're a better team than the Tigers, and it looks like they'll avoid Olson because it looks like he's pitching on Wednesday. So they'll get Skubal, it looks like, and it looks like they'll probably get Kenta Maeda as well. And then they might get Mize too. But they'll be but they'll avoid Olson, and I think no reason why they shouldn't be able to take 2 out of 3 there.
Yeah, I think just like last week, I think 4 would be at least a good like parameter of what a successful week would be, especially if you get 2 against the Orioles on the road. I mean, like we said, this is it. Everyone's been talking up the Orioles the entire offseason with their young prospects. I had Gunnar Henderson like 3 leagues. I traded him away in one of them, but that dude is an absolute stud. That lineup, not only they are stud lineup, but they all look the same as well. I swear to God, I look at every single one of these Orioles prospects, and it's like these like Western Nebraska kids, like kind of like the flowing surfer hair, like pale face, freckles, and everything. Like that's literally like these young prospects are, but they're dudes. But I think what's really going to help them is taking 2 out of 3 out of Milwaukee, which they could have easily swept, like we talked about earlier. But doing it in a dominant fashion. So it's not like they just snuck by. They took two of 3 from the reigning NL Central champions on the road, beating them down by 30 by having 36 total runs in 3 games. So I think taking that and going into Camden Yards, which is Gleyber Torres' favorite ballpark to hit.
Yeah, I think Gleyber's finally going to get his first home run of the year. I think it's finally going to happen this week. I think I'm going to say it happens before April turns to May. So either Monday or Tuesday, he's going to get one.
Yeah, I think I'm hoping from the fantasy side of me that Gunnar Henderson's the only one who gets a hit and a million home runs, but but they end up losing for the Yankees. And that he just does well, but the Yankees could take it out and state their dominance and show that they're still big brother, and that the Orioles have a long way to go when it comes to capturing the AL East this year and being titled as the next up and coming.
Right. Yeah. Is it weird that is it like weird that I don't really hate the Orioles yet?
I, I
Like,
don't I, I don't think so because I think there hasn't been prior bad blood. So by that I mean like it's not like during the 90s or 80s or something like that there was like some
yeah.
big rivalry like the Mets used to have with the Cardinals, like all the way back then, that still has trickled down today. And then when you think about like those older Oriole teams, was Mike Messina and like Cal Ripken, who are just like two like dudes that you can't hate on, Hall of
Yeah, like
Famers.
Musina came to the Yankees and like he was great for us too. And then like yeah, if you hate on Cal Ripken, like do you hate Santa Claus too? Like
Yeah.
what's wrong with you? Speaking of Gunnar Henderson though, do you want to hear possibly the worst fantasy trade ever in hindsight that
Oh
I
God.
made last year?
Oh, oh
um
God.
yeah, so me and a few of my friends were on a league together. We were out at the bar, and I was trying to strike a deal with one of my friends. Now this is back in like May of last year, so it's before it's still indefensible, but like it was before Gunnar Henderson was like really blowing up, or like really like started like mashing, and when his played his way into winning Rookie of the Year. So like first couple of months of the season or whatever, I was like, man, I need I need a third baseman, and my friend was like, I got Chapman and Arenado, like I'd be willing to trade you Arenado. So we strike a deal, and I trade for Arenado, and then my other friend was like, oh, do you want to make a trade now that you're getting a third baseman, like do you want to make a trade, like do you want to trade me like this guy Gunnar Henderson, just for like whoever. So I was just like yeah, sure, why not. I mean, wasn't really thinking ahead, wasn't really thinking at all, but and definitely had a few sodas in me, but yeah, so it was just supposed to be kind of like a whatever kind of trade, like trading like a bench player for a bench player. So I fucking end up trading Gunnar Henderson for Jeff McNeil.
Oh God.
And
Oh my
then
God.
to make it even worse, the original trade that me and my friend had agreed to for Arenado, I guess that trade got vetoed by other people in the league, so it didn't go through. So then I had to pick. And then the Gunnar Henderson trade went through. So I had no third baseman. So I dropped Jeff McNeil. Like as soon as I actually got him processed and like on my team, I dropped him for like another third baseman. I think it ended up being Josh Jung, who ended up being pretty good, but not as good as Gunnar. And then like me and my friend worked out another trade, and I got Arenado, and like things worked out fairly well for me. I finished second in the league, but my God, that trade, I probably would have won if the whole thing if I didn't make that trade.
It's always the hindsight wheeling and dealing. I mean, I can't even imagine. Some people love to like offer me Mets players all the time, thinking I would take them. But like
Yeah.
I know for a fact that like never take Jeff McNeil. He has like no fantasy value ever since like 2019. Oh well, 2022 he did have that
Yeah,
batting title.
2022
Yeah,
he was pretty good, and I was
hoping that
kind
he
of
would have been
banking on him
capture.
having like I think I was kind of banking on him having like that type of year again, which he
Yeah,
obviously did not. Luckily it wasn't like a dynasty league or anything like that. I mean,
I
if it
was
was a
about to ask
dynasty
you that
league,
because
if it was
if
like a dynasty or keepers league, then then I don't know, might might not be here doing this podcast with you today.
Yeah, so the one that I traded Gunnar Henderson in was a keeper league. So he was someone I came into a league where someone um I guess left the old team. So there was like a player pool and Gunnar Henderson was one of the people I took. And I offered someone straight up Henderson for Lindor, which is not looking great right now. It's not bad when you look at it in hindsight because you figure Lindor's going to turn it around. But now that I think about it, as far as like the age and like length of the
Yeah.
keeping Gunnar Henderson, it was. Definitely the Mets fandom in me, and probably from having Gunnar Henderson in like 3 leagues, I probably should have kept him in the league where like actually keeping someone matters after this year.
Yeah.
That would,
Yeah, and I mean, depending on like what your, depending what your team is looking like, and what your positional needs are, and if you're, if this is a dynasty league, if you're like tanking for next season versus playing for this year, um, you know, it might not be a terrible move. But I guess the whole moral of this whole story is just like, if you have Gunner, fantasy advice for the week: if you have Gunnar Henderson, just don't trade him.
yeah. If you
Unless you're
have,
getting unless you're getting like Mike Trout or like Shohei Ohtani, don't trade Gunnar Henderson. Even
yeah,
then, like, you have to look at like the needs and stuff, and before like making that decision. But yeah, just Gunnar Henderson's too good. Can't trade him. I wouldn't be surprised if he hits like at least 2 home runs in this series. But yeah, I would say, for the Yankees, if you put the over under at 3.5, I would take the over. I think they probably just squeak by with 4 wins this week, but anything more than that would be great.
yeah, no, I totally agree. I think they hit the over as well, and I think that my mentality for that is just how dominant they were against the Brewers, and especially that it was a collective effort, and it was, from your catalyst and captain Aaron Judge finally starting to roll through, and then it also being in Camden Yards where the Yankees seem to just dominate every single year. There's multiple series where
Yeah.
they go in and they just, they take their dominance and show that, they love to play there. It's basically their second Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, yeah, like it's a different team now with the Orioles. Obviously, they are, obviously I expect it to be a battle till the very end for the division, which is why, even though it is just like a late April, early May series, why I think this is like a really big and really important series, even if it's still early. Like, I feel like every last game is going to count and is going to make a difference at the end of it, when you know when it's all said and done, who comes out on top in the AL East. So yeah, I think this is a huge series for them. And honestly, if they were to, I think splitting is like the realistic expectation. But I mean, honestly, if they were to take 3 of 4, or maybe even sweep this series, then if you go and lose 2 out of 3 of the Tigers, I really don't give a shit at that point. But it would be nice to kind of make that statement and be like, yeah, even though you're like this young up and coming team and you have a lot of great players and great prospects, and you're like making your mark on the league now, like Camden Yards is still our house. That would be like a nice statement for the Yankees to make coming into this tilt.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's the head to head matchups in the divisions are always, I feel like they roll over into the next series or the next time that you see them. So, for example, I feel like that the outcome of this series will have an impact the next time they see each other, just because of the consistency of how many times that you play one another in the division. And I think, especially for the Yankees, seeing a lot of these up and coming studs, especially from the pitching rotation from the Orioles, I think getting a look at them and getting all the information that they can is very vital for future opportunities when they're versing each other.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's a pretty good point, actually. Like, I feel like that's something that over the years I've seen happen a lot with like the Yankees and the Red Sox. Like, it's like I feel like one year, like it'll be like I feel like one year, like the Yankees might dominate the Red Sox, but then there might be another year where the Red Sox dominate them. And then there's some years where it's like early in the year, like one team has the other team's number, and then like in their later series, like in August or September, the other team's dominating them. So it seems like it's just like a never ending battle for that momentum, and for that intel and that information that you get, when you play a team. What is it, 19 times a year? Do they?
Yeah,
Although I think with the scheduling now, it's a little less.
yeah, I think it's like maybe 12 or something like that,
Yeah,
or somewhere in between. I
yeah,
know
it's
it's Yeah, I heard the number 12, but I don't know if it was like at least minimum 12. Well, I don't know if it's maximum 12, but it's like
That
centered
sounds
around
about
that
right.
number.
Like, they probably play each other like four, they probably play each other like four series, two, two in one stadium, two in the other. So yeah, I'd say 12 is a good amount. Although there was something about like, and I like the way they do the scheduling now where it's like you play every team each year,
Yeah.
and because it's like you get to go to it's like pretty balanced, and you get to go to like all the ballparks pretty much. If there's like, or like if there's like a ballpark that you've been like wanting to go to that the Mets never go to, it's like, oh, I can do that this year. Or like same with like me and the Yankees. But there was something about like playing a team 19 times, and just seeing like how much those teams like grow to like hate each other over
Yeah.
those 19 games that you know that might be a little bit diminished by only playing each other 12 times, but it should still be fine.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely going to be. I'll be switching back and forth between the Yankees and the Mets, and still with the playoffs going on. So it should definitely be a fun week, and actually might take over for the Mets because now that I'm looking at their schedule. They start tomorrow a 4-game series of themselves against the Chicago Cubs. So um, potentially, someone that they're battling for in the wild card this week. They lost 2 in a row, but they're 17 and 11. They actually just brought up recently their top prospect, which is Pete Crow Armstrong. So he was actually the prospect they sent over to the Cubs for when they got 2 months of Javi Baez. And yeah, and he was. I'm pretty sure they drafted Pete Crow Armstrong that year, and they traded him in the same. Like I guess because the draft is, it's in this like in the middle of the season. Oh, All Star Weekend.
It's in
That's
like
usually when.
Yeah, it's in like July usually or something
Yeah,
like
so
that.
they do it. I think around that time, um, and so they sent him for Baez, or it was like within a year, and they got 2 months of Baez, and Pete Crow Armstrong was a 17-year-old coming out of high school, was already a top 5 prospect for the Mets. Traded him for Baez. Finally, 2 months of Baez comes up this past weekend's first game, first at bat home run. So this was it's the opposite of the Jared Kelenic effect when they traded him away for Edwin Diaz and a couple of other pieces. But the
All you
Cubs
can
haven't.
know.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot he was a part of that too. Jesus, he's still paying him today. Um, but the Cubs, they have a good young team. I remember them last year scrapping against us. They have Christopher Morel, who I have on a couple of fantasy teams. I know is doing pretty well. Nico Horner is another one. Not too familiar with their pitching staff, but they got them at home for 4 games in a row. Um, looking, oh, your boy looks like your boy. Game one is a couple of Yankees: Jameson Tyone versus Luis Severino.
Oh yeah. I just saw that. That should be a good one.
Yeah, and ironically, they're both. I
Ghost of
mean,
Yankees past.
exactly with Tyone with a 1.8, Severino with a 2.14. I'm not expecting a walk off home run bottom of the 11th to um, you know spiral into the Mets. All of a sudden, become like a juggernaut and it's starting to click. Um, I'm hoping that between the 4 games at home, I'm hoping for 2. But you know what? I'm going to be bold, and I'm going to say that they're going to take 3. I like Severino in game one. I like the lineup that they have going. Severino, Manaya, Budo, Hatehauser, who's the last one. So I'm hoping that they could take the first 3, and hopefully this is the last time we're seeing Adrian Hauser. Adrian Hauser in his last 3 starts, 13 innings, 10.54 ERA, 2.12 WHIP, and it seems like they have Tyler McGill and David Peterson in rehab right now. Hopefully, I thought it would hopefully be Christian Scott coming up to take his spot in the rotation. But Hauser is starting to show his signs of a long reliever who's being injected as the number 5 starter. But besides that, I'm thinking that the consistency between Severino, Manaya, and hopefully Budo getting on track, that they're able to take 3 or 4 from the Cubs. I think the maybe the embarrassment of you know winning 2 games after a great road trip, finally being back home. Warmer weather is finally coming in. JD Martinez, after 2 games, again consistently in the lineup. If Mark Vientos is being supplanted into the third base, maybe platooning with Brett Beatty, you're starting to maybe get some more pop and maybe some more consistent hard contact.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think 3 out of 4 against the Cubs, I think it's doable. I
It's a
don't know if
lot.
they're
It's a lot to ask.
I think it's doable though. I don't know if they're going to do it, but looking at that first game between Sevy and Tyon, obviously wish both of them the best, and it's great to see them, great to see them flourishing elsewhere. But I would say it's kind of a matter. I think that game could be a pitcher's duel, and it's kind of a matter of like, I guess who, out of those people, like, whose start to the season is more sustainable.
Yep.
But I would probably go with Sevy. I mean, I feel like I feel like he's younger, and to this point in his, to this point in his career, I feel like he's had more consistency than Tyon. So I would say, I would say that, Sevy, I would say that, if you're banking on like one of them to have a good outing in that game, I would say that it's more likely going to be Sevy than Tyon. The Cubs are kind of a hard team to get a read on, because it's like
Exactly. Yeah.
the Cubs are a difficult team to get a read on, because it's like, I mean, they're in first place right now, and they should be, and they should be like one of the better teams in the league, but it feels like, I don't know what it is, but it feels like they're missing something that's stopping them from like really being great.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know if it's maybe that like one bat to build around, or maybe like, I mean, I know they signed that guy Amanga Imanaga, or the lefty
yeah,
Japanese pitcher who
yeah, you
actually
guys will see
ironically
him on Wednesday, I believe.
yeah, so I don't know if it's that. I guess maybe it's just someone that commands the ultimate like respect, or someone that like you pitch, like you pitch around, or someone where you're going against them, so you need to see multiple pitches instead of going up there free swinging earlier. So one of those where um, you know I wouldn't say stop them from being taken seriously, but you're not going to really consider them in the conversation when it comes to championship competing until they, I don't know if it's going to be like swinging a deal for, one of those star players who are on a terrible team or something like that. But that's what I understand what you mean, where it seems that they're missing
Yeah, it
something.
seems like their lineup is just like a little. Their lineup's just like a little bit weak, like Mike Talkman. No disrespect to Mike Talkman, but like he was batting like in the 2 hole for them tonight against the Red Sox. I mean, he hit a home run, and he went 2 for 4 and had a pretty good game, but like I don't think that Mike Talkman, batting in your 2 hole, like I don't think that's like a really like sustainable lineup. Um, yeah, Nico Horner. Yeah, Nico Horner's pretty solid. He's a good leadoff guy. And then they have Dansby Swanson, who is another guy who's just kind of tough to get a read on.
Yep.
Like he's not having like he's very hot and cold, and he's not really having the best start to the season. And I would say he's probably actually on my who's not list whenever we do that segment. But yeah, I mean, like they have Dansby Swanson, like batting in their 7 hole, and he's like not been really producing. So, and even with their pitching too, it's like, yeah, they have Imagata, but like I probably just butchered or Imanaga.
I don't think
I say I
we
just
said it
butchered the fuck out of
4
his name.
times, and I think every single time you and I just made it sound
Yeah,
way worse.
yeah, yeah. We'll make note for next program to get the pronunciation down. But
Yeah.
like aside from him, like yeah, Tyon's pretty good, but at this point in his career, you can't really expect like more than like 5 innings out of him, really. Um, so I mean, like it's like aside from him, like who's like the real like workhorse like of that staff, and
Yeah, like
then
Kyle Hendricks, I think they is still
and they
pitching for
blow a lot of
them.
games too. Like they blow a lot of leads too. Like their bullpen is a little shaky. So I would say, depending how awake the bats are for the Mets, 3 out of 4 is definitely doable. I would say that you probably expect like more of a pitcher's duel in the first game between Sevi and Tyon, and then Assad versus Manaya on Tuesday. That might be a loss for the Mets, and then and then you got Budo versus Imanaga, and that's a game I feel like could go either way. Probably give the edge to the Cubs in that game, and then you got the barn burner on Thursday between B Brown and Hauser. So
Thank God I'm going to be at work during that time. So,
yeah.
but
Yeah,
um,
like
but
actually, I would not like to use PTO to watch this game.
no, please, not at all. But yeah, no, that now that you mention it, I completely forgot because I actually I have, or I had, I think I probably still have Dansby Swanson on my dynasty team. Um, Perfect example of if you're a pitcher that the Rays are not resigning or a hitter that the Braves are not resigning, there's an issue there. And I think when a lot of people saw that Dansby Swanson was not resigning with the Braves, there was a particular reason, and they usually hit on things correctly when it comes to you
Yeah,
know prospects that they brought up and let go through not not only not offering him a contract while he was playing for them, which they normally do. They get ahead of it early, but not even making him an offer once he stepped into free agency. And then the other one who I actually had on my fantasy team as well in the dynasty is how this is probably why I am not doing well in that one. Cody Bellinger resigning with them this offseason after trying to potentially get a
like
huge
a
deal
mega
coming.
deal.
Yeah, exactly. Which a lot of people I think a lot of it was what was he doing that was related to it being a contract year, playing in Wrigley Field, which is like, it's a hitter's ballpark. So that's why a lot of people thought the Yankees would take a swing on him because of the short porch. But
Yeah,
he's on the injury list and looks like it's going to be a while. I think it had, from what I saw. So I think that's why their lineup is now looking a lot weaker. It's because of Dansby Swanson not living up to the contractual expectations, and then of course Cody Bellinger, your probably best overall bat, going down with an injury.
yeah, and like even when Bellinger was healthy, like he wasn't really doing that good. Like, cause I have him on one of my teams too, and like he'll be good for like he'll be good for a home run here and there, but like I feel like he barely gets on base, and like outside of his power, I feel like he's really hasn't been offering the team that much. And with the he's always been kind of like he's always kind of been like a feast or famine type of player, or like one season he like is like an MVP candidate, and then like the next season he's like on the verge of getting DFA'd. He's like one of those guys. So I feel like even when he was healthy, like he wasn't doing that good. I feel like the Cubs are just kind of in a Cubs are just kind of in a spot where they have where they have a lineup that is where they have a lineup that is struggling.
Yeah, and it seems like they're relying a lot on younger players and to be their core, and then of course hype man Mike Talkman in the top of the lineup
Yeah.
trying to get the rally going. But before we end, to see what I would put their line at the week. They end the week playing a 3 game set on the road against one that should pique your interest, which is the Tampa Bay Rays, who to me, it looks like right now they're under 500, which is very, it in the past couple of years, you would say, don't count them out. Like they always start off a little bit slow and they end up finding their way back and clicking during the year. But at least from the outside of the American League East viewer looking in, it seems like this Rays team is maybe just a little bit different from years past. And I think a lot of it could be to do with their lineup. I know Rosarena hasn't gotten off to a hot start at all. They have Brandon Lowe on the IL list. One of their top prospects, who I ironically traded away, Connor Mead. He hasn't come out hot yet, so it looks like we're not getting the same raise as the past. But to me, any team that develops around pitching and has a good farm system pitching in a streamlined way they do things, that's the Mets Achilles heel. So I'm thinking that for this, it'll be lucky. I would say, in my opinion, if they don't get swept. I'm saying 1 game will be a win, definitely um, down in Tampa. So for me personally, I'm having the over under for the Mets be 3.5 this week, and from my perspective, I'm taking 4, 3 against the Cubs, 1 against the Rays, hoping for more. But if you can elaborate a little bit more of what you've seen differently from the Rays this year compared to years past, and if I'm kind of just projecting, or maybe there's a little bit more that they're just struggling with right now, and they should be competing for that division when we're looking back in this couple months from now.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't write the. I'd say you're pretty. You pretty much hit it on the nose. I mean, they're they're not off to the best start, obviously, and I know that they usually don't. Although last year, I think they like won like their first like 15 games or something crazy like that. I think they started the season like 11-0, and went on like, and then they like went on some crazy winning streak to start the season, and then they lost in the wild card round. But I mean, looking at the Rays, it looks like the pitching has been. It looks like the pitching has been a bit of an issue. Like it looks like all the pitchers that they kind of bring up, and all like the pitchers that they bring up and they come in and they hurl and they shove. It seems like their luck might be like kind of running out a little bit with that.
Yep.
One thing with the Rays and the Braves, just this was something I thought about before, when you were talking about like teams paying players that they let go. I think like a lot of times teams kind of trick themselves where like they'll be like, oh yeah, that team just didn't want to pay them. But it's actually like something far deeper. But yeah, I mean, I think the issue with the Rays, I think that I think their lineup is underperforming. Randy Rosarena off to a pretty sluggish start, which is plaguing one of my fantasy teams. Yandy Diaz, who is like supposed to be like one of their better hitters, is not. He's not doing a whole lot. Like looking at their lineup now and looking at the numbers, it looks like Isaac Paredes is like probably their best hitter.
Have him in a
Um,
couple of leagues.
and like Ahmed Rosario is like getting like meaningful at bats for
I
that
forgot he
team.
signed there.
So like that kind of, I feel like that kind of tells the story, and that's like kind of all you need to know. And then like Harold Ramirez he's also doing pretty bad and pretty underwhelming. And like they don't really have the starting pitching to like make up for the lack of hitting. And then I mean, their bullpen is okay, and like Pete Fairbanks is supposed to be one of the better closers in the league, but he
I think
has an
he's hurt, right?
injury.
Yeah.
He has an injury. I'm not sure. It's like a nerve related issue. Those are usually never good. And I think that's like the second time he's been hurt this year, if I'm not mistaken. So Yeah, it's just like a mixture of underperforming bats and lackluster pitching with a little bit of bad injury luck. Not that I'm complaining.
Yeah, I think a little bit too. I think they're starting to realize that they're in a transitioning phase. I mean, the fact that they let Tyler Glasnow go and traded him to the Dodgers. So I think a lot of these guys that they got for him in return, a couple other trades, I think they're trying to restock and revamp their system, and until I think what really drives them is their starting pitching, and as their pitching goes, they go. So I think until they get that next crop of young studs, I think it's going to be a little bit of up and down, kind of like not not a little bit similar like the Mets, how right now they're developing their arms in their new pitching academy. They're in AAA, AA, so they signed these the Sean Manaeas, the Severinos, to kind of be the Hausers, the transition until these prospects are actually ready instead of just getting these prospects and throwing them in right away. They're going to take as much time to develop them as possible so that they can have the greatest potential impact when they're up.
Yeah, and to manipulate the service time so they can get as much like time out of them as possible when they get up to the big leagues, which is something that like every team seems to like to do. So I'm sure that has a little bit to do with that because you wonder like about Junior Caminero. I think he's like one of the top prospects in baseball, but like he hasn't really been I'm pretty sure he's in their minor league system now. I think he was called up at one point though, but I think they sent him back down. Um, and but he's just barely getting any. He's just barely getting any playing time or any at bats. So you wonder if maybe they're just kind of taking their time with like developing like some of the top prospects that they have like him, and kind of just taking their time doing the whole like manipulate the service time thing that teams like to do. Although he started the season off on the big league roster, I think. So I'm not sure how that affects. I'm not sure how that affects like the service time, but that that's like a different story.
Yeah, I think it goes like there's so many days where like until like you're considered like a rookie or something like that. So then you get like so they had like a window of opportunity to play him, and then they could send him down, and then like the clock restarts again for like the service time. It's all weird. I mean, I for me, the perfect example was like in 2019, the Mets, Pete Alonso was just crushing in spring training, and they were just like, all right, this guy's ready. The Yankees did the same thing with Aaron Judge. I mean, they were older prospects, but like, if they
Yeah,
can
they
help
did
you,
that with Volpe last year too.
yeah, if they can help you now, why not? And I think, we're seeing it this year with Skeens in Pittsburgh. uh, Speaking of, the
Yeah,
bunch of fans that and everything, is that he's literally going like 2-3 innings per minor league start just so that they could get the service time, and they don't want to like use all of his bullets. So it's just like, you know y- a lot of these times you're trying to like save from injury, manipulate service time, get them up in time to compete, when it's like, well, he's ready, just bring him up now, maybe get ahead of it and offer him a team friendly deal to make him, multi-million dollar, three, like, a $3 million figure man.
yeah,
That's what the smart teams do, like the Dodgers, the
yeah. The
Braves,
Braves.
the Braves, and
Yeah,
things like that, instead of just like, oh no, we're just going to pitch him 2 innings instead so he doesn't get hurt, and then we can still save money.
yeah, and that is something the Pirates actually have been better about.
Yeah.
In recent years. Obviously they've gained their reputation, rightfully so, for kind of just being like a farm system team, like a developmental team for the rest of the league, where they don't pay their players. But over the last few years, they've actually done some good business. I think, like they did the proactive thing with a few of their players, where they signed Brian Reynolds and Key Brian Hayes to like 8-year extensions, like before they hit free agency and before like their price tags would like double or triple, and they wouldn't be able to afford them. So I actually have to give them credit for that. And I think that Skeens, I think, is going to be up sooner rather than later. I think that we're going to see, because the Pirates rotation beyond Jared Jones and like Mitch Keller, the Pirates rotation is pretty booty. So I think that I think we're going to see a Skeens call up in either May or June is my prediction for that.
Yeah, I think especially if the Pittsburgh could get back to their hot start, they'll definitely want to add some firepower instead of trading away assets to get firepower. They can look in their system. And speaking of hot, that leads us into a new weekly segment, which we're going to do, which is who's hot, who's not. When we take a look at players from our prospective teams, and you know whether it's beginning of the season, what happened in the past couple week or two, who's hot, who's not for the Mets and Yankees, and maybe someone around the league that we can mention that could be a potential pickup on the waiver wire or in fantasy leagues, or maybe someone that you could potentially trade for. So when it comes to who's hot, who's not for the Yankees, Chris, lay it on me.
So who's hot? I'm gonna go with it's kind of a boring, obvious answer, but gonna go with Juan Soto. He has 2 home runs in his last 5 games, and he's gotten like 6 walks in his last 5 games. Dude's just an on-base machine, and is continue like I alluded to before. He's just continuously the heart of he's just continuously been the heart of the Yankee lineup. Like I wanted to give it to Judge, but I need to see a little bit more. Hopefully, I'm hoping that by this time next week, when we do the segment again, I'm hoping that I can confidently put Aaron Judge as my who's hot for the Yankees. My who's not hot for the Yankees would have to be. I mean, do I just go with? I don't know if I just go with Gleyber Torres here. Gleyber would be the. I think Gleyber would probably be like the obvious answer, though. Yeah, I'm just gonna go with Gleyber for who's not.
Yeah, I mean, hey, call him out before Baltimore. Like, you know, you
Yeah,
put
maybe
him on
that'll
blast.
give him a little extra. Yeah, just a little extra. Little extra fire lit under the ass. There are a few candidates for this. Like Rizzo could have been a who's not candidate. Before these past couple of days, it could have been. It could have been Judge, but like Rizzo hit a home run today. Judge has hit home runs in his past 2 days, so kind of by default. Although Glaber did have 3 RBIs in the game yesterday against Milwaukee. Aside from that, he's struck out 4 times in the last 5 games and really just hasn't really provided or really done much of anything of value for the lineup. So, yeah, Glaber would be my who is not of the week for the Yanks.
Yeah, well, hopefully by this time next week, we're talking about, hopefully a little less not. Maybe the not will be someone the worst out of the best that the Yankees put forward that week, and especially with Glaber in a contract year. But now looking around the league, who would you say is someone who's hot and taking the league by storm, especially a month and a half into the season?
So I would say for my who's hot for the league, I would actually go with Jared Jones, pitcher for the Pirates.
Yeah.
He's got a 2.79 ERA on the season. He pretty much in every start that he's had a quality start in every single start, with the exception of I think he had. Actually, no. He's had a quality start every time he's pitched. I believe, actually, with the
Oh
exception
wow.
of, yeah, like he even pitched today. I think the Pirates lost that game, but he might not have gotten the quality start because I don't think he made it all 6 innings. But he has not given up more than 3 earned runs. His fastball is pretty electric. So I would say, Jared Jones would definitely be my who's hot for the league. And then my who's not for the league is would probably have to be Randy Arozarena. Just seeing like how bad of a start that he's off to. I didn't even realize didn't even realize it until you brought to my attention like how lackluster he's been so far. But he has like a negative WAR so far on the season, which I don't know. I don't know how much you read into stats like WAR and stuff, but you know, like, but that's like very not like him. I mean, he actually got like benched or healthy scratched from the lineup today. Well, really just benched. I mean, I don't think he was like scratched altogether, but he didn't start today. He went 1 for 6 yesterday, and 0 for 3 the game before that, and then he was like 1 for 4 the past 2 games before that, and then he went 0 for 4. He's struck out. He struck out like 6 times over the last 5 games, and he's really just not been producing. Hasn't really been getting on base too much either. His OPS is like 488, and he just really hasn't been doing much of anything. So that would be my who is not of the week.
Yeah, and so hopefully that he continues to struggle a little bit when it comes to the Mets when they
Oh
play
yeah, I'm preying on his downfall daily.
what for next weekend. But speaking of that, when it comes to the Mets side, and I'm starting with who's hot, I'm going to go with Pete Alonso. And part of the reason I'm going to go with Pete Alonso is that he had his 200th home run on Saturday, and he's only the fourth player in Mets history to do so. And I think by the time that he came up, which was the year after Judge came up. I think him and Judge are like 1-2 in the most home runs in the league, and then they had 1 year cut off because of the COVID year. So these guys are putting up home run numbers, for their respective organizations consistently on a yearly basis, and he's doing it so. In a contract year, he has 8 home runs already after a slow start. In the last week, he's batting 292 with a 320 on base percentage. So, and 7 runs, him scoring 7 times himself. So I think Pete is getting hot and he's getting hot at the right time. And who's not, which is a lot harder to choose from because there's a lot more people to choose from when it comes to the Mets and who's not. But I'm going to go with Brett Beatty. Brett Beatty in the last week since coming off the IL is batting 111, on base percentage of 238, and his having a lackluster defense on the field as well. That's it's kind of steamrolling and kind of becoming intertwined. And now it's going to be his time to prove himself with Mark Vientos having um, you know being 3 for 4 since being called up and getting an opportunity to start at third base. So he's really going to have to turn it around, per se, because next year there's a lot of third base options in free agency. There could be a lot of trade candidates as well if neither one of them work out. So they're going to have every opportunity to right this ship and turn it around.
Awesome. And then what about for the rest of the league?
Yes. So for the rest of the league, my hot is going to be uh, someone who broke my heart in 2015, and that'll be Salvador Perez for the Kansas City Royals. On the year, he's batting 350, 7 home runs, and 26 RBIs. One of the players that I did keep when taking over the new Dynasty League, and he's number one at his position. But specifically in the past 2 weeks, he has 3 home runs. He's batting 375, and he has an on base percentage of 457. So this is kind of outrageous stats coming from a catcher, especially an older one at his age. So I don't know if it's from the maybe all that experience of seeing so many pitches from so many different pitchers and catching so many different pitchers, and then maybe seeing it from a different perspective. But it kind of seems that veteran catchers do kind of age pretty well hitting, but this is kind of some outrageous stats. And then when it comes from the not, I'm going to go with Nick Castellanos from the Phillies. He's batting 181. He has a OPS of 461. He just hit
Yikes.
his first home run the other day, and I think the overall starting to see the decline of him was the day that OJ Simpson died. If he didn't hit a home run on that day, I think his powers are starting to deteriorate with all these bad events. So, who's hot? Salvador Perez. Who's not? Nick Castellanos on my end.
Yeah, I think if Castellanos didn't hit a home run on the day of OJ's death, he might have been DFA'd by now, or at least maybe Philly's Twitter would have DFA'd him. But yeah, and then we have I guess we have one more thing to discuss before we close out for the evening. One Bad Bunny and his sports agency facing a $400,000 fine from the MLB Players Association and a potential 5-year ban. Am I getting that right? Why don't
Yep.
you? I think you're a little more. I think you might be a little more familiar with the story. So, why don't you tell the viewers what is going on here? Why is Bad Bunny in the news from a baseball standpoint, and what does it all mean?
Yeah, I guess we should have knew once as we saw the name was Bad Bunny that this was going to be bad. But it was saying that Remus Sports, which is his sports agency, is facing a fine of $400,000, and then having their agent certification revoked for 5 years. And this is because in April 2023, which was the initial launch of their sports agency, there was receipts of transactions of gifts, and whether they were monetary or anything incentivizing players to come and sign for them, which is a form of bribery essentially. And so this story just came up recently, and we kind of assumed it was because on April 18th of this year, Ronald Acuna Jr. Signed with this agency. And prior to Ronald Acuna, players that were notable MLB players that were a part of the agency was Francisco Alvarez, Ronnie Mauricio, Espinal from the Reds, Daza from the Rockies, Ezekiel Tovar, Wilmer Flores, and Jordan Diaz from the Athletics. So not name brand guys. So I think once they saw that someone with the stature of Ronald Acuna came on board and switched agencies randomly, I guess they were able to backtrack these receipts. So um, that's basically the gist of the story. So any thoughts that you have when you're when you're reading that Bad Bunny is being prevented from representing MLB players?
Well, I was about I was about today years old when I learned that Bad Bunny had a agency that was representing MLB players. So it's kind of this is all kind of news to me. Um, I am kind of familiar with some of his music because my girlfriend's a big Bad Bunny fan, but from what she tells me, he seems like a rather messy individual, and seems like he's always getting canceled for something. So this is like, not the most shocking thing in the world. It seems like they were, it seems like they kind of, it seems like they kind of tried to do too much too quick, and that's kind of how they got caught in this pickle, baseball pun intended, where like they were, like you said, they were representing some like middle, some like mid tier players like like Wilmer Flores and William Arroyo and people like that, and then they just go and get Ronald Acuna Jr. and it's like, okay, like you know and it's not like his agency was like some prolific agency. I know that, like, they probably saw like the whole Scott Boras, like all the shortcomings of Scott Boras over the past off season. Maybe they saw that as like an opportunity to land a big fish. But it seems like they just tried to do too much too quickly. And obviously, when you're bribing these players with gifts, and there's the paper trail with that, you know, obviously you're gonna get, if you go from like those types of players to, you know, signing the reigning MVP who just hit 30 homers and got 70 steals, was the first player to ever do that, and you're signing him to your agency, you know, along with the other guys who are not nearly as good or as prolific as Acuna. It's definitely going to raise some flags, and obviously once they investigate it and you have that paper trail, you're kind of fucked. So it's not the best look, especially considering I'm sure that there are probably plenty of players, going into these coming years that are set to be free agents that, want to maximize their income as they should. And, they're probably not considering, Scott Boras just because of like his track record over the past couple of years, with this year being like easily the worst of them. So, players are kind of probably exploring like other agencies and other avenues to negotiate contracts and and get their money. So for this kind of like scandal to happen, is just kind of a bad look for everyone involved, I guess. I'm kind of surprised this story isn't like bigger than it is. I mean, maybe like it's being overshadowed by the whole, like maybe MLB is just like, all right, like we're already like catching enough shit for like the whole Otani thing. Let's just kind of like sweep Bad Bunny under the rug. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he said it looks bad, it was pretty funny. Yeah,
Oh,
you could say
I didn't even mean anything like that. But yeah,
I
pun
appreciate.
intended. It's a bad look.
Yeah, between that and then I thought you were gonna say that he got caught in a carrot instead of in a pickle, but you know, yeah, I mean, honestly, in the end, this is something we're going to be monitoring and see if anything comes of fruition besides just the revocation. Maybe more names come out or what exactly that they offered. But I mean, between Tony gambling and now this, we're off to a wild start when it comes to scandals in the MLB this year. But I think that that's just a fun story, like fun or random story we wanted to offer. But before we wrap it up, do you have any closing thoughts?
Um, no, not really. I think we covered a lot in this episode, and I think I pretty much gotten all my thoughts out there. So hopefully it's another prosperous week for our Yankees and Mets, and we can continue to have we can continue to keep the vibes immaculate for the next show.
Yeah, I couldn't say that any better myself. So, thank you everyone for listening or watching. Please, go watch our video, like and subscribe. And I don't know if you saw in the ticker below, go follow us at BD Pod 24, part of the Middle Initial Podcast under the Ascension Podcast Network. Follow Chris Hecker at Meta World Beast with the 3 and the 5, myself, Trainer Badger 07, and hopefully seeing you all next week with some good news. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Don't follow.